Today is September 16th, 2024. I am Iain Bryson, author of I Love You Like One, a letter to my daughter abducted by a cult. Today I'm going to be doing question and answer part 7. What is a parental child abduction? What is familial human trafficking? The purpose of this video is twofold. First of all, it's to start the conversation on checks that could be put into place for the benefit of children that have to be put in place. We need a child-centered approach where one parent cannot lie about another parent, or neither parent's word or ability to persuade should be relevant. A thorough evaluation of the child is the only way to get the truth and provide safety for the child. The other purpose of this video is to reiterate that my child still hasn't been evaluated. Almost 14 years ago, she was taken from me. And 3 weeks prior to the abduction, I was pleading with people for help. Within a half an hour of the abduction happening, I was at the police department imploring them to stop my daughter from being removed from the country she resided in and evaluate her. Instead, she was taken back to the place my daughter's mother called a cult, the same place she had just returned from with bruising, terror that someone was going to touch her pee-pee, and talking about her grandfather's private parts. The same grandfather that her mother said the nicest thing he ever did for me was bring me 1 cup of tea. UAH.edu defines an international parental child abduction as the removal or retention of a child outside their country of habitual residence in breach of another parent or guardian's custody rights. This is from the U.S. State Department in 2022. Since 1994, it is estimated by the U.S. government that more than 30,000 American children have been illegally abducted abroad by one of their parents. International parental child abductions are illegal, so how do they get around this with my daughter? They did so by what my first wife called the red herring, i.e. pointing the finger at me, saying they escaped from me, even though I never had any police contact, social services contact, and I was the one desperately trying to get my daughter evaluated. I was begging people to intervene. There are huge holes in the system which allow parents to abduct their children from the other parent. In my case, the first thing that I did after I realized that my child had been abducted was go to the local police department in the Netherlands. They wouldn't take a report. Since my daughter was born in Connecticut, I contacted the U.S. Embassy. They informed me that it was out of their jurisdiction and they couldn't do anything to help me. A duty officer recommended that I re-abduct my daughter and get her to the embassy where they would then evaluate her, but I never saw my daughter again. Eventually, I filed a report with the U.S. Secretary of State. The U.S. Secretary of State told me that it could take up to 2 years, and in the meantime, my daughter would be residing with what my first wife called a cult in Poland. The U.S. consular officer told me repeatedly that when my daughter is in Poland, since she has a Polish mother, she is considered by the U.S. government and the Polish government to be a Polish citizen and not an American citizen. The U.S. Department of Justice website at justice.gov states that every day children in the United States are wrongfully removed from the United States or retained outside the United States in violation of parental rights. In 1993, Congress passed the International Parental Kidnapping Crime Act, which created a federal international kidnapping offense and makes it a federal crime for one parent or other individual to remove or attempt to remove a child from the United States or retain a child outside the United States with intent to obstruct another person's custodial rights. For example, consider that a married couple had a son together in the United States. During a marital dispute, the father moves his son to another country in order to keep him away from the mother with no intent to return. In this situation, the father has committed the federal crime of international parental kidnapping. Justice.gov further states that it is common for the removal of a child to occur during a heated or emotional marital dispute, in the early stages of separation or divorce, or in the waiting period for a court custody order or agreement. International parental kidnappings of U.S. children have been reported in countries all over the world. But we weren't living in the United States. Even though our daughter was born in the United States, we moved to the Netherlands because my wife wanted to be closer to her family in Poland. Therefore, since we were living in the Netherlands, the law that was broken had to be either Dutch or international. The law that was broken in the case of my daughter was an international law. The 1980 Hague Treaty, which was signed by the Netherlands, Poland, and the United States, makes it illegal for one parent to take a child living in one country away from the other parent and into another country. But this is exactly what happened with my daughter. The Hague Treaty of 1980 does not guarantee that the child will be returned. To obtain the return of your child, you must first be able to demonstrate that your child was habitually resident in one convention country, that the removal to or retention in another convention country was wrongful. Specifically, the removal or retention violated your custody rights, and that you were exercising or would have been exercising your custodial rights but for the removal or retention. In the case of my daughter, she was a resident of the Netherlands. Removing her to Poland was in violation of the Hague Treaty because I had custody of my daughter along with my wife. And I certainly would have been exercising my custodial rights, except that she was abducted to Poland. I filed under the Hague Convention with the U.S. Secretary of State requesting that my daughter be returned to her country of habitual residence, the Netherlands. They told me that it could take up to 2 years for this process to take place. Just to review, my daughter was abducted on December 27, 2010. I immediately tried to get help, and I continued getting help every day after her abduction. On March 21, 2011, Melanie Brandt, a consular officer from the U.S. Secretary of State in Washington, D.C., wrote to me, "Hello, Mr. Bryson. The Dutch Central Authority has notified me that they received your Hague application and supporting documents. I will keep you informed of any additional communication I receive from the Dutch Central Authority regarding your case. Sincerely, Melanie Brandt." Because the U.S. Secretary of State in Washington, D.C. wasn't giving me any real information or any definite timeline as to when this would occur, I continued writing to other offices in the U.S. government, including American Citizen Services in Germany. Their response to me on April 29, 2011 was this: "Dear Mr. Bryson, your recent inquiry concerning the abduction of your minor daughter has been returned to this office for response. As much as we sympathize with your plight, as your daughter was abducted from the Netherlands to Poland, her case unfortunately does not fall within the jurisdiction of the U.S. Consulate General in Frankfurt. However, you appear to have already taken the appropriate steps by informing the U.S. Consulate in Amsterdam and Interpol. The Department of State considers international parental child abduction, as well as the welfare and protection of U.S. citizen children taken overseas, to be important, serious matters. We place the highest priority on the welfare of children who have been victimized by international abductions." They say they place the highest priority, but I never received any responses that said they were going to help. I never received any information about my daughter being returned to the Netherlands or getting a welfare check. In late April 2011, after 4 months of trying to get a definite answer and trying to get my daughter evaluated, I decided I had to go to Poland and make them listen to me and make them evaluate my daughter. Of course, this led to me being incarcerated in Poland, but during my incarceration, none of the U.S. officers ever reached out to me to update me or inform me about any Hague proceedings that were happening. As soon as I was incarcerated, they stopped the Hague proceedings. On the European Parliamentary Research Service website, they state that a 2020 UNICEF report estimated that 1 in 8 children globally have been sexually abused or exploited at some point in their life. In Europe, 1 in 5 children are estimated to be a victim of some form of sexual violence, and between 70% and 85% of child victims know their abuser. A third of abused children never tell anyone about the abuse. Reasons include feelings of shame and guilt, fear of not being believed, not knowing whom to tell, or inability to recognize the abuse. In early December 2010, my child returned from a 3-month visit to her grandparents in Poland with all kinds of signs and symptoms that she had been abused. And her mother told me that they would be returning to Poland within a few weeks. I didn't believe her, but I told people I was terrified, and I tried to get her into counseling. Then 2 days after Christmas in 2010, she was abducted and I never saw her again. And I've been trying to get help ever since. My question to you is, what are we going to do about this? And what are we going to do about the failures in our system that allow children to be abducted? My child is not the only child that this has happened to and is happening to. We need to take steps to protect our children.